Okay, we're going to come back together. It's actually been 15 minutes of break time. So I'll invite you to take your seat, and we will proceed with the second part of our program. It's a pleasure to see all of you out on this lovely May afternoon, early evening. It's hard to believe this is the last episode of the current Windfall season. A few thank yous are in order. I certainly want to thank the Lane Arts Council for helping to fund us with a grant. I want to thank the Lane Literary Guild and the library as well. And certainly want to thank Anita Sullivan. She's been a wonderful person to work with in terms of planning and arranging and presenting the Windfall. And our promise to you is that we're going to do it for one more season and then try and twist somebody else's arm. A little preview announcement here. And also want to thank Aria for a wonderful reading and being so accessible and available at the very last minute. So thank you very much. It's my great pleasure to introduce Ralph Salisbury. And I'd like to start by simply reviewing what the Windfall publicity said about Ralph, because I think it is very articulate and to the point. He has recently won the River Teeth Literary Nonfiction Prize for a memoir, which seems an appropriate addition to the 3 books of short stories and the 10 books of poems previously published during his long and distinguished career as a teacher, as an editor, translator, and writer. At the Northwest Poets Concord in Newport last week, as many of you in the audience know who were there or heard about it, Ralph was honored with tributes from the many students he mentored during his years at the Creative Writing Program at the University of Oregon. It was a wonderful culmination of the Poets Concord weekend and just an impressive array of responses to Ralph as a very memorable teacher. It was very, very impressive. Ralph's work has been constantly energized by the experiences during his upbringing within a Cherokee, Shawnee, Irish, English, American family, and the painful change to pacifism that came about as a result of his being in the Air Force as a very young adult during World War II. In addition to that, what I'd like to add to the publicity bio is the fact that over the past 25 years, my wife Judy and I have come to know Ralph and his wife Ingrid Wendt quite well. And it has occurred as we have lived as neighbors across the street from each other in South Eugene until relatively recently. In the beginning, there was the casual exchange of pleasantries and the shared experience of raising teenagers. Eventually, these led to some socializing with Ralph and Ingrid, to becoming acquainted with their circle of friends, and to certain social rituals like lighting firecrackers in early July. So neighbors on Charlton Street for 2+ decades. Back in the beginning, I couldn't have predicted that circumstances would eventually bring us together in more distant places as well. For example, a week of tropical weather one rainy Oregon spring in Playa del Carmen, down in the Yucatan, where we shared a VW bug to visit various beaches, where we snorkeled in clear blue water and ate wonderful food al fresco. Or, at the end of the 90s, when Judy and I were teaching at the Frankfurt International School in Germany, having Ralph and Ingrid visit us as writers-in-residence for a week of workshops and readings, and then heading over to the Moselle Valley with them on the weekend in search of the perfect white wine. I still remember the steep ridges covered with vineyards, the chill in the autumn air, and the warmth of good companionship with old Eugene friends. And so it goes, and thus we continue how we continue. Thank you, Ralph, and thank you, Ingrid, for your ongoing friendship, for all the conversation we've had over time regarding literature and the arts, and for continuing to be good neighbors.
think I'm guilty of having said at a reading in another venue, Tsunami Books, that perhaps the most dramatic thing about my presentations is my getting. It's a little harder each year, a little more dramatic, I should say. So I guess I could think about my reading now as kind of a preview of coming attractions, or a kind of looking over a range of things I've tried to do through the years. And so in my usual logical fashion, I reversed the order of what I was going to read. And instead of starting with a section from the memoir, which Tim mentioned, I'll start with something from my most recent publication. And then I'll just go on from there. First, I want to thank Tim for his kind words of introduction. I want to thank the library for having me for my first appearance here. I'm really happy to be here. And I want to thank the Literary Guild for a nice surprise of the book shelf, and so many things. In fact, thank the Lane Literary Guild for. So I thought I'd read something from a book that's not published yet, but in addition to the memoir, So Far So Good, which they're hoping to have out by next March, they told me. I got the exciting news that they've gone into production, whatever that means. But anyway, that's a start. And the other book is a book of poems, which has shifted titles 3 times. But I think what I finally settled on was Like Sun in Storm. And that'll be published by Habit of Rainy Nights Press, a small press from operating in Portland, Oregon. And so this is a poem. This poem I'll read is a part of that book, and it was published in a Cloudbank magazine. It's a magazine all of you writers should be aware of. And it's titled Wise Wolf Salt Town in Dream and in Love. Perhaps I should say autobiographically that my name, Ralph Salisbury, translates into Cherokee really as Wise Wolf Salt Town. So that's not the Cherokee language, but it's a Middle European language for my first name, and then the Cherokee adaptation of my second name, Salisbury. Wise Wolf Salt Town in Dream and in Love. So lonely I cannot sleep. I am in a bar in a strange country. The only familiarity, advertising neon, glowing so intensely, the glass at my lips seems molten sand again. Blake's universe in each grain, humbling itself by being earth. Earth fetus aflame in a womb of vacuum. Seemingly benign ghosts of grapes and grains, encouraging strangers to become known, inciting enemies to kill or to become friends, and encouraging men and women who have suffered maybe almost too much from each other to remember through childhood's necessary angers the beauty of father and mother, of grandfather and grandmother, of buck and doe, of swan and pen, stamen and pistol, and to try again. Although I am the one seated at a table, pencil a teetering one-legged dancer, awkwardly entertaining only himself, I ask a woman improbably juggling glass, pretzels, and other presumed difficulties, if I may, since the physical is here less substantial than her and my unlikeliest and maybe impossible dreams, join her. Maturely sapient, as well as miraculously, unobtrusively, youthfully beautiful, she understands, and 2 or perhaps 3 moments or hundreds or thousands of years or days later or earlier, she takes my or gives her hand. In my hand, a history of being brutalized is a tool for controlling horses, tractors, knives, guns. In her hand are years of the vibrant beauty of playing piano, from troubled girlhood to challenged womanhood. Shadows between sundial knuckles measure hours of living, the gracious eternities of Mozart. Slenderness, reminder of gender, of defending skirts, hems, perilous border with future, of intentionally or semi-intentionally or unintentionally beckoning possible lovers. My wife, as she was when or before I met her. I am almost sure, or perhaps the ideal self she is struggling to become, each hour, instant, nearer to being. Her silence encouraging me to confess that I am humbly, almost hopelessly determined to accomplish something for humanity, something more important than trimming my toenails so as not to leave animal tracks at the beach. Through smoke of surrounding fellow creatures' perverse use of my Native American people's ceremonially received blessing from the gods, tobacco, she struggles to see my anciently thoughtful, my again maybe inconceivably young profile. My eyes are aslant from the spirit sanctity of her gaze, although my tomahawk blade nose shares with her slender nose and with the snouts of generations of mammals killing or being killed or merely dying. Whatever air is there where the slightest sigh might be carved into marble or gold. Threat, curse, endearment, prayer, I tell her, all exhalation offers carbon dioxide to vegetation, and oxygen is the return gift from roses, laurel, poison oak, cacti, to such as us. Some Santa-inclined plants are near neighbors. Others are mystery magi, oceans and continents away, known only by the life-sustaining blessing we receive from them, the benison of oxygen, reaching us like the taken-for-granted glimmers from light eons dead stars, like legacies from family members too distant to visit. Candidly, my companion, offering glimpses of glistening tongue intended for kisses, as well as discursive searching, and glimpses of teeth cleansed with respect, forgives that I am, as usual, self and cosmos obsessed, saying that despite our mutual shy glances of appreciative appraisal, selection, and passion, she is mentally or metaphysically someplace else at this moment, telling her own stories, and would I care to hear? I would, I sincerely, though inadequately, say to her presence or absence, and to the rest of our clamorous species, care. I'm going to read a few poems from one of my most recent books of poems by the new and selected Light from a Bullet Hole. And that will immediately come to my hand as I reach in here. I hope. Ah, there it is. Good. And the first poem I'll read kind of connects with the piece of the memoir that I'm going to read later. I began the memoir in the year that the two Twin Towers were taken down in New York City. And this poem is about that. I should tell you that this poem was supposed to be the lead poem in a magazine that was going to be printed in New Jersey. And then the magazine folded, something all of us writers have experienced a time or two in our lives, I think. And so it was never published in a magazine, but it's published in the New and Selected. And it's just simply called Before 9/11/01 and After, and it's dedicated for my daughter Martina, and you'll see why in the poem. I should tell you, though I think most of you know it, that the only people killed by enemy action on American soil during World War II were killed here in Oregon by a Japanese balloon that had fragmentation bombs, and it killed members of a Sunday school class. I had the small obligation of looking for those balloons, and we were ordered not to shoot them down because we'd start a forest fire, but we would keep track of them. I never saw one, but that was my only connection with it. But then this is in the poem, and I thought I should mention it at the outset. Before 9/11/01 and after, Oregon coastal cannon could not still one from a submarine, and the Sunday school class was sent to heaven because we machine gunners training to kill others who tried to down our bombers had failed to see a Japanese balloon as it had descended bearing bombs intended to burn acres and acres of billions of dollars worth of centuries of trees whose great-grandparents were not even cones when a galleon hold empty for gold sailed further offshore than any spear could reach, and cannonaded villages which might have resisted invasion. As steadfast as those sacrificing lives to their conception of God, my countrymen are offering what syllables as beautiful as petals wilting have always said, and recalling Nazi firing squads eliminating future sabotage, I take no satisfaction from Afghanistan's or Iraq's destruction. Instead, I hear the dead, whose deaths I and millions of my generation caused. Their homes blown into tombs become the sorrowing tones of a friend. The conqueror's, our language, now his. At 17, a volunteer. At 25, a resistor. I lived by the words of orators. At 75, survivor of a heart attack and cancer, I heed the silence of thousands in my daughter's voice, phoning 3 miles from explosions to reassure her mother and me just after the World Trade Center went down. The next poem I'll read is dedicated to Earl Burney, the great Canadian poet, who was editor of a magazine called Prism International. And he came to a poetry reading I was giving, and I read this poem, and he said, "Oh, I've got to have that for the magazine." So that's the only time that ever happened to me. It was really kind of nice. And this is a poem entitled Elephant Shoes. And I should say that at this point in my reading, I'm going to read maybe 2 or 3 poems that have to deal with the process of writing, since I'm assuming literary guild members are all writers here, and we all have some things in common that other people, God help them, don't have. So this is about writing. Elephant Shoes, in memory of Earl Burney. A good fight, inviting as a good road invites. A man, knuckles beginning to tingle, may, like his country, try a little travel. But I remember armored cars scattered like meteors torn off of stars. Love, traditional poetry's rose petals, tent, pitched, ditched, and staked against storm. Bare beauty swims a science lava up mountain, eager to be mine in my mind, but on reaching snow-quilted summit, dives to center the earth. And I, afar from idealizing man, I abide in a rented house, work 40 hours a week for someone I dislike, like many of you, and picnic in our public wishes, resenting your noise as you do mine. But when you shamble over to offer the use of the fire you have made for hot dogs, or one of those obscure metaphors about weather nobody ever understands, I feel like crying. So long our kids would have a salt lake to sail newsprint ships, the Hiroshima, the Nagasaki, half across. And if I do not cry, not daring to risk melting the ice, all of us skate toward eventual summer. Forgive me for being no better than you, a poet who will stumble and fall over a final syllable, though living for good moments, which sometimes seem oftener and longer, sometimes not. Forgive me, this early morning verse, sputtering like a power mower, almost out of gas, below your bedroom window, when you were maybe in the best dream of your whole life so far, or loving your wife, or feeling your own poem, scampering into its den, ahead of the alarm clocks, steel-edged bicuspids, and the god-awful elephant shoes of the usual things that you have to do. A rather grisly urban legend is that if you catch a crow and slit its tongue, then you can make it talk like a parrot. And so when I was an ignorant young boy, I was told that urban myth, although I was told it out in the farmlands, and I never put it to the test. But it always stuck in my mind that people thought they could do this, and so I finally got it into a poem. And this is a poem called Slitting the Tongue So That Crow Should Be Parrot. Let's say, for our ears are carved to hear, when there are no roars, explosions, screams, memories mumble. Let's say that I caught a crow whose wing would no longer take air and would take weeks to forget Dad's bullet. Let's say that I slit a tongue as stiff as a quill I'd have into reed, and with my breath made Yankee Doodle clear enough for parents, teacher, and even big kids to guess, or say what I'd been told was wrong, or I'd cut too deep, or timid, too short, or couldn't cut at all. And the cawing was only my own pain, blade slipping, or plain intended to hurt Japanese, splitting air a last time, earth telling my bones more than enlistment posters had. Or say, our enemies' customers again, age bends my trigger finger, or pen and other suffering tongues must sing. I always loved dogs. I have on my computer screen, thanks to Ingrid, a picture of me as a 3-year-old between our 2 big farm dogs. And so a few years ago, being a cripple by now, somewhat, I was attacked by 2 big dogs. And I felt rather betrayed, you know. I thought they were my friends. So this is about that experience and a few other things. I'll read it now. It's after heart bypass surgery and other ritual for continuing struggle. To save my heart, veins from legs which paraded through World War II have, like loyal royal guards, been sent to higher ground, delaying overthrow. But 2 big dogs, teeth sharper than pen, intend to end my history. The foot trying to defend, weakened from redeployment of blood and shod with soft rubber from trees French legionnaires ordered, planted by Indo-Chinese, tapped now by Vietnamese, supplying an American corporation named for victory, Nike. Heedlessly, or as historians say of our country, terribly young, the dog's companions demand reassurance that lack of licenses, leashes, and rabies inoculations won't end their best friend's freedom. Never in my grim time, so young, I place my plight with that of buffalo hunted, not for food, but for fun, to near extinction, and with that of my Cherokee forebears, and keep carefully quiet until, again, beyond the reach of jaws stronger than mine, I seize between worn, grave spade-shaped, vanishing American incisors my right to whine, to growl, to warn, to bite, and to the next breath. Thank you. I think the time has come for me to take a drink of that water. Okay. Oh, I didn't put grease. Thank you very much. Well, I am now 86 years old, and I think I should not try to be too optimistic. That would be false. But I'll read a poem about trying to face up for whatever comes next. And I'll read this, and then I think I'll read to end, I think I'll read a section from the memoir. A ceremony for trying to accept death. One tries to tell a truth about death, which will reassure all. First, frogs fighting last blizzard's roar for their generation's share of air to shape into hope in years. Then petals, which fell among maple leaves, encouragingly slow to fade, blaze on graves, now risen in time for weddings, joining in the centuries of processes, assimilation into sun's small family circle. One senses in seeds ascension, dreams burgeoning, becoming dream, and senses in silence suggesting unquestioning love, a voice assumably benign, while trying, like possibly everyone else, to quell a thought that the beautiful confusions of just one more dawn would give more than any truth or well-intentioned falsehood can. Well, I think I advertised I'd be presenting previews of coming attractions. So this mainly proved to be true, that except for the poems I read from Life from a Bullet Hole, which has already been published by Roger C. there in the back row, by publisher of Silverfish Press. And so I'm going to read the book that won the prize, and I'll read the first several pages of that and conclude with that, and leave you with all that suspense of waiting for it to come out next March. Okay, from So Far, So Good. Bullet shattered glass clattering onto my baby bed. I awake and cry into darkness for help. Do I remember this, or do I remember being told? I will feel it, whichever it is. I will feel it, chill Bombay wind buffeting my 18-year-old body a mile above an old volcano's jagged debris. Feel it, seeing photos of Jewish concentration camp children huddled together for warmth. Photos of Korean orphans huddled together, homeless in blizzard after American bombing in which 25 I have refused an order to join. Ma snatches my blanket swaddled body up to shield me against whatever might come next, and glass shards pierce her arms. Pa lunges out into the night, gripping a pistol with which he'd once wounded an armed robber and had too many times drunkenly terrorized his own family. Pa, alert to shoot whoever is attacking our home, finds only snow. Snow, a mass killer, which will, scientists tell us, bury the last child to be born on Earth. Targeting a farmhouse window would be a drive-by shooting in today's news. News meant to arouse fear. Fear which seems to sell medications, deodorants, conformist designer clothes, manipulative political candidates, and an economically disastrous bad for everyone's physical and mental health, materialistic, militaristic imperialism. Bombs exploding, hundreds of babies cremated alive, What did my experience of the world's violence amount to, really? A racially motivated harassment, a neighborhood grudge, or maybe a drunken young stranger saw our dimly lighted farmhouse windows as an opportunity to outdo pals who shot holes into road signs meant to keep people from being lost or from losing their lives on dangerous curves. A drive-by shooting, a mystery. A drive-on shooting, not mystery, but history. Giddy up, oxen, mule, horse, and drive on to the last acre of free-for-the-taking land. On to extermination of the last of the Mohicans of tribe after tribe after tribe. A ride-by shooting, motivation and Easterners' urge to imitate fictional Wild West heroes by aiming out of a train window and killing a buffalo or an Indian. I think of my brother Bob's telling me that another American soldier shot an Arab off his horse in Algeria during World War II just for the hell of it. In this rambling, free associational placement of electronic impulse on screen, ink on page, there will be some accounts of terror and death, few compared to those on TV news, but more than I or you might wish. A survivor of one lightning strike, some car and plane mishaps, some explosions, a few bullets, a heart attack, cancer, and other human afflictions. I ask myself, as readers may well be asking, why should anyone read this? Maybe for warnings implicit in my confessed mistakes. Maybe for what little wisdom my many years have bestowed. Maybe for the story of someone who grew up without indoor plumbing or electricity and worked despite hunger in often above 100-degree heat and often 30 below zero cold. From lantern-lit pre-dawn to lantern-lit late night on a Mississippi River Valley farm beside a narrow, dusty, muddy, or snow-choked dirt wagon trail which had become an auto road. If you had walked that road with me from my 4th through my 11th year, stamping with one booted heel to crack yesterday's footprints ice into zigzag lightning, you would have found yourself in a one-room school's smells of chalk, dust, glue, and the seldom bathed bodies of children. If you had joined me in visiting my father's mother, you would have hiked several miles along a creek on a generation's worn footpath until you reached the small hill farm to which our outgunned and outnumbered Cherokee, Shawnee forebears had fled, abandoning rich valley plantations to murderous government-sanctioned mobs. Someone who hunted first with bow and arrow, and then starting at age 12 with rifle and shotgun, and helped to keep his family alive, I might belong in a museum among stuffed animals. But I have learned to use this computer, more complex than those with which I aimed the cannon and machine guns of a B-29 bomber, same type plane as the two which ended lives in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and changed all of our lives. I was 17 when I enlisted in what was then the Army Air Corps. I was 20 when World War II ended, and I was 25 when I refused orders to join in the firebombing of North Korean cities, and only escaped prison because a computer failed to extend my enlistment and sent my World War II honorable discharge the week before I was arrested. 75 now, in a year when Muslim martyrs' suicide attacks have destroyed the U.S. World Trade Center and much of the Pentagon and killed thousands. I've started this day as I've started most days of my life by trying to write. Why? Yesterday I would have given the honest answer, Socrates was executed for giving to most questions worth asking. I do not know. Today my life and the lives of all living things soon to end, I do know why I'm beginning to write a hop, skip, and jumps, and maybe some dancing memoir. My daughter, to whom I read or told stories nearly every night of her childhood, has asked me to put some of our family's realities down, with no fictionalizing, no poeticizing, just things as they were. I am trying, although for most of my life I've depended on imagination as an astronaut depends on a heat shield. Imagination protecting me from the painful realities I've needed to re-enter. Free association, spontaneity, a wholeness of the moment, a union of past and present, of childhood and after. These are what I seek, and the result may be as random and unorganized as my bank account or my life. Whether or not I live to finish and publish this manuscript, here are some of the memories of a poverty-stricken, malnourished, sometimes nearly fatally ill, and mostly mysteriously happy child. Memories of a mixed-race, somewhat educated world citizen, and memories of an individual seeking what seems to be best for himself, for his loved ones, and for other individuals. Whatever is here, I offer to the world, knowing that my life is but one of a multitude of lives, all doomed to undergo change, and, I believe, to go on and on in the great plan, which perhaps we humans can, in our best moments, somewhat sense. Ask questions, or if there's time.
We have time for some questions if anybody has something to say or ask.
So has your daughter read your manuscript yet, and has she
It's a good question.
responded?
And the answer is, well, Socrates, I don't know. But I said it to her at the same time I said it to the publisher. She has the opportunity to read it. Stop teetering around up here and sit down. Thank you very much for coming.